welcome to Fishin, the podcast where we discuss Modern's most competitive tribe and help the whole community become better Merfolk players. I'm Kody, I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and not Kody Smith on Twitter. And we also have, as always, Matt. How you doing, Matt?
I'm not doing too bad tonight. Actually got to play Magic face-to-face with real people for the first time in a while yesterday. My LGS was having a Battle Bond event, and my packs were awful, and so were my partners. So we came in dead last, but we had a bye at one point, so me and him got to play a little bit of Modern. I'm now under the impression, I think I mentioned on stream before, that I'm very, very certain that Ancient Stirrings is going to get banned probably within the next 18 months. So I've been play testing Modern decks to try to find a new one that I like, because I think Tron is going to go away. So I've actually put together a Hollow one and having a ball with it. So I might have a new jam. We'll see what happens.
Do you think that that Ancient Stirrings going away really is enough to just straight up kill Tron?
I think, no, it's not going to kill it. I think it's going to make it probably more tier 2. Maybe tier 1.5. It's going to take a pretty big hit. I think there was a semi-fixed Ancient Stirrings put in Dominaria or one of the newer sets. I think it was 1 green and 1. I'll have to look it up. I can mention it later.
So, Matt, I believe you're referring to Adventurous Impulse, which is green. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order.
Yeah, there you go. So it's still sorcery speed, 1 green. It digs to only 3, not 5, and you can't grab your planeswalkers with them, but you can grab your creatures and your lands. So,
yeah. Speaking as someone who's, played against you, playing Tron a lot and just playing against it, it's a pretty common LGS deck. To be honest, it's one of those decks that getting a Karn on turn 3 is just nuts, bananas, bonkers. Like, and anyone could agree on that. Like, it's so powerful.
Yeah, and anybody who follows Magic on Twitter at all knows that if you pilot Tron, you're the foreman of a salt mine. Like, people, yeah, people just get so pissed at you. So, for the most part, I don't care. But after a while, being the villain's not super awesome.
Yeah, and did you see on DJ's Twitter he had the picture of the salt mine, the salt museum?
I did.
I thought that was pretty good. But anyway, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as FishcastMTG, and you can subscribe in the Google Play or Apple Podcast app. You can support us for free by just subscribing and leaving a review, or just even clicking the 5 stars. You don't have to leave a review. All those help kind of float us up in the iTunes.
Be as lazy as possible to help us. That's all we ask.
Yeah, that's a free way that helps people find us in the iTunes store. So that's
in the morning during Tinker Stinker time, while you're on your squatty potty, shout out to Brainstorm, you can just go ahead and give us a 5-star.
I don't know if that's happened yet. If they've actually.
It's happened.
Oh, good.
I haven't. It's official.
I've been going to a closer place for work recently, and so I haven't had as much time to listen to podcasts. My backlog is this big, and you can't see it because
when he says this big, his hands are really far apart.
They're really far apart,
like really, really far apart.
Yeah, we're trying to paint a picture in your mind because you can't. Yeah, anyway, you get it. Anyway, we are also on Patreon, and you can find us on patreon.com/fishcastmtg, where you can support us for as little as $1 a month. And we actually have a new patron this month, Lonnie B.
Yeah,
so
Lonnie.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you so much for supporting
Lonnie, that's a fun name to say. Thank you for sponsoring us, so we can say your name more often, Lonnie.
Lonnie, yes. I don't think I've ever had a reason to say Lonnie before this.
I don't either, and I'm so glad I do.
Now we do. So, and again, one of the perks of being a patron is we have a Discord. There's not a whole lot of people in there, so come on in and jump in.
It's usually just me, Kody, and Kyle talking back and forth to each other.
Yeah, well,
it's more of like a private chat room at this point, but we're growing. Damn it, darn it.
We're dams are fish things, like like the dams that the salmon go up. Jump over. But anyway, we're gonna roll right into the random Merfolk card.
Ooh.
And Lonnie has picked a really cool one, I think, and I don't think he knew what he was picking when he picked this one. But this is random Merfolk number 79. And Matt, could you read our random Merfolk?
I can. It is Judge of the Currents. It is a mono white Merfolk from Lorwyn. It is 1 white, 1 of anything. For a creature Merfolk wizard, he's a 1/1. And he has the ability, whenever a Merfolk you control becomes tapped, you may gain 1 life. So, as I've stated before, Lorwyn is just absolutely phenomenal. It was great for Merfolk in general, but as I said, it was just out of this world. I remember a buddy of mine building a combo deck around this card. Essentially, you gain infinite life very, very quickly.
I actually really wanted a Bant Merfolk legend in Rivals of Ixalan. I did not get my Bant just because I wanted to put Judge of Currents and Kumena and Cryptolith Rite all in the same deck, and what's the Paradox Engine, just do weird dumb combo-y things, and I think that would just be super fun.
Combo fish number 9.
Yeah. And I really like the flavor text on this. It says, though the currents of the lanes shift every year, the marrow never lose track of where they are or where they're going. And this kind of speaks to just like how, before this, Merfolk were always in the oceans, and Lorwyn doesn't have an ocean. It has these lanes, and these lanes are drifted or are moved ever so slightly as the Merfolk need them to be moved, basically, and they with the Tide Shapers is the group of people that kind of move the lanes around. I'm learning a little bit as I'm reading the Lorwyn books, but so yeah, it's just kind of cool of like kind of helping describe, through flavor text what kind of was happening with the Merfolk at the time.
And one thing I can say too is if you follow Morrow on Twitter, he does polls. I think they last a week or 2, something along those lines. And he says they mean nothing; they're just for fun. But it's become very, very obvious that the polls he's doing, he's collecting player and fan data to see what they want to do in the future. Because I remember one of the earlier polls from probably about 2 or 3 years ago was potential tribes you want to see. And I think the finalists were pirates and dinosaurs. And lo and behold, a few years later, a year and a half later, we have Ixalan with pirates and dinosaurs. So more recently, he did a planes you'd want to return to. And Lorwyn was actually the winner. So I'm very, very optimistic, more than I've been in a long time, that in the next 18 to 24 months, we might actually go back, which would be very, very cool.
With Therese Nielsen and Rebecca Guay and Jesper Elsing doing art for all these Merfolk. Oh, geez, it would just be... It's going to be a good time to be.
Yeah, again, I mean, we're speculating something that's going to happen like maybe a year and a half, 2 years plus from now. But if they do go back, I really hope they do keep the traditional storybook art.
Yeah, you can cross your prawns, or I'm trying to think of another thing that you could. I mean, I guess you could cross your fins. We'll keep our fins crossed for Return to Lorwyn. But
tentacles, cross your tentacles.
Oh no, we're getting into weird territory there.
It's getting to be a little hentai in here.
But Judge of Currents, I mean, it's not really pauper playable, I don't think, because I mean that little
totally
life
commander playable though.
Oh yeah, I mean if you're splashing white and splashing,
waka waka.
Yeah, we're full of excellent top shelf jokes only, and but yeah, like I think that this would be great in Commander. I mean, I don't seeing any play in Modern, because that 1 life gain just isn't enough to be impactful. I mean, obviously you look at decks like Soul Sisters and stuff, and those are fun decks, but
yeah,
they're
essentially
not like up there.
Yeah, essentially, when you combo off for life, I mean, when gaining life in Commander really doesn't make any difference. But if you can combo off and gain infinite life, I mean, essentially, more often than not, it ends the game, unless you have a card like the Sorin Planeswalker, where it's like their life total becomes 10, or they have some sort of infinite damage combo. So, yeah. but again, more often than not, an infinite life combo means game over.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, like basically you're either getting yourself to a point where your opponent's damage doesn't matter, or you're giving yourself enough time to just kind of go, okay, well now I'm gonna find my win con and kill you with it. Or you can weaponize it with like Aetherflux Reservoir, or just win the game with Felidar Sovereign. We don't need to tell you all how to win games in Commander. That's for the multiple Commander podcasts to discuss. All right, so we're going to go into our main topic here, which is kind of a somber one for us here on the podcast, and I know this is that I'm sure some people might just turn this one off.
Yeah, and you can blame this one on me. So about 2 weeks ago, I think about 2 weeks, after the new Spirit Lord was printed, and Bant Spirits finished top 4 in a TCG event, fairly big one. And Bant Spirits has been doing very, very well on MTGO. It's really starting to put up some results. And I saw somebody on Twitter post, "Wow, Merfolk is now the third most powerful modern
Merfolk
deck."
It's the third most powerful Merfolk deck.
It is the third most powerful Merfolk deck. Essentially, yes. So I told Kody, I'm like, this is something we've beat around the bush on this a few times, but it's probably time that we actually have a real conversation about it and talk about the shortcomings of Merfolk in Modern, and why it's lagging behind Humans and potentially Bant Spirits. I will say, little caveat, that I'm not 100% sold on Bant Spirits yet. I think the deck is really good, but it's still new. It hasn't been figured out yet. So I don't know if it does have longevity. If I had to guess, I think it's more the flavor of the week, and we're just seeing more people playing it right now because it's new. And once people kind of get off it a little bit, I think it's going to come back down to the pack because there's going to be less of it out there to place.
Yeah.
And then also, while going over this, we excluded talking about Modern Elves because it's really not a synergistic tribal deck. It's more just a combo deck in Modern. So I didn't think it really has a place in this conversation. It's kind of the weird redheaded stepchild, the Cody Smith, if you will, of the tribal decks. And then we also didn't talk about Modern Goblins because it's Modern Goblins. Get back to me when we're talking Legacy.
Yeah. So I do have some comments about Bant Spirits before we move too far on, but I do want to have a little disclaimer that I play Merfolk almost exclusively, especially since starting this podcast, basically to keep up with how things work with the deck and everything like that. I've been putting a little bit more time into and more thought into how I play the deck. We are talking about shortcomings of the deck, but it is definitely healthy to examine yourself every once in a while. And see where you stand, because if an athlete didn't get checked out at the doctor while they're in their whatever sports training they're doing, before they get out on the play court, they're gonna blow themselves out before they get to the score zone, and that would be terrible. I was seeing how many bad sports references I could say before you cracked, but
I'm letting you do your thing. I'm just letting you do your thing.
The point stands. You have to be reflective, and the way you become better is, number one, lose, because you're going to learn more from your losses than your wins. But one of the other big things is kind of checking out the competition and seeing where you stand among decks that are similar to yours and decks that are different than yours, and that's kind of what we're doing here today.
Correct. And this also will help us in the future kind of keep an eye out for cards that can potentially make the deck better. So, for example, as we were just talking about, the next time we'll see a massive influx of Merfolk, if I had to guess right now, is if we do go back to Lorwyn, especially because we just got a huge influx in Ixalan. Unfortunately, the Ixalan Merfolk didn't really do anything for the modern deck. So we're going to really have to keep our eyes peeled for the onesie twosies that we see in the every set that comes out. And again, the only other way that these other decks are going to come back to the fold a little bit, if we're not printing cards that are going to be helping the deck, is that if things get banned out. And in those two decks in particular, they're incredibly fair. So I don't see anything getting banned ever.
Yeah, and again, Merfolk is definitely one of those decks that there's nothing so broken about the deck that anything is really in danger of getting banned out. I mean, even Cavern of Souls, which is, I would say, one of the most expensive cards in the deck, is definitely not so powerful that it's ban worthy, or that anyone should consider it ban worthy. And you know, well, I mean, we'll get further into it, and obviously, Bant Spirits being kind of like you said, the new flavor with this new Lord. It's kind of too early to tell, before we would suggest anything get banned out of the Bant Spirit list.
So the thing we wanted to hit first was what do Merfolk have that the other tribes don't? So let's start there. Let's start with the good things. So Kody wrote the majority of this in the notes, and then I went in and with my squatty potty pooped all over his cereal. So I think the best way to discuss this is for have a slight kind of back and forth. I'll let Kody make his original points, and then I'll kind of retort to why I disagree.
Okay. So, and for reference, the two decks that we're kind of comparing and contrasting ourselves most to are the 5-color humans lists, which have been making a lot of to use our terminology, they've been making a lot of waves recently, and Bant Spirits, which is kind of just recently cannonballed into the pool of Modern as a more viable deck thanks to this new Lord. So. The first item that I have here is that Merfolk has the best lords. Blue is one of the most played colors in Magic. I mean, fight me on that one. You at me on Twitter, I don't care. I will defend. I will die on that hill. It's one of those things that you're gonna see islands, and so sometimes just having your lords give both a pump and a evasion is an excellent way to kind of push through damage in ways that other decks just don't have. So for example, the new Lord in Spirits, it has evasion itself, but it doesn't grant any sort of evasion.
The new Lord is Supreme Phantom. Just FYI, it's 1 blue and 1. He's a 1/3 spirit. He has flying, and he gives other spirits you control 1/1. So as Kody said, yeah, he pumps, but he doesn't do anything else.
Yeah. So and one of the benefits that Lord has is, and the reason you run green in the Spirits list at all, is for Collected Company. And that's a Lord that you can kind of just basically get in at instant speed for combat tricks. I mean, just getting more bodies out on the field and pumping at the same time. So I'm not saying that there aren't other good Lords. I'm just saying that Merfolk has the best Lords in Modern.
So, and I disagreed. I think Merfolk has the most lords in Modern, but I don't think it necessarily has the best. I know words. I have the best words. So one thing that you conveniently didn't mention was, well, one, I agree that Supreme Phantom is not as good as the other two lords that you have. The two lords you have in Fish, Master of the Pearl Trident and Lord of Atlantis. But comparatively speaking, Supreme Phantom is 1 and a blue instead of 2 blue. So he's a little bit easier to cast. And that's why you can actually splash other colors, which is one of the things that Merfolk has had trouble with, because it has to essentially stay in mono blue, even though people have tried splashing white, splashing green, even splashing black sometimes. But the second Lord in Spirits, you've conveniently kept going over, and that is actually Drog Skull Captain. Drog Skull Captain is 1 white, 1 blue, and 1 of anything. For a 2/2 flying, other spirit creatures you control get 1/1 and hexproof, which is just by itself is probably better than all the other Merfolk Lords, because that hexproof is phenomenal. So again, you get 2 Drog Skull Captains out. I mean, you better have like a Wrath of God or something along those lines that doesn't target, because you're never touching a spirit again.
Yeah, no, and believe me, the thing though that and this kind of bleeds into my next point is being monocolored. One of the things about, obviously we have shocks and we have fetches, but being monocolored means you don't have to lean on those lands, when you're not strong. You can just kind of push through you know, and only lean on your islands. You don't have to, you know, worry about any of that other stuff. Now, I'm not saying that, and again, Draugr Captain is a magnificent lord for sure, and you definitely run it, but you know, you get a little bit of extra kind of oomph when your lords cost 2 instead of costing 3 mana and also costing 2 separate colors.
Yeah. And then the humans lord that we missed was probably, again, a little bit weaker than the others, but still incredibly powerful, is Thalia's Lieutenant, which is 1 white and 1 of anything for a 1/1. When Thalia's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each other human you control. And when another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. And I mean, this thing just gets out of control really quickly.
Yes. Yes, it does.
So again, I mean, it's doing different things, and it doesn't probably sound as powerful on the surface, but once you see it go off, it's like you blink and all of a sudden this thing is like a 5/5, and all your other humans have either gotten 1 or 2 other 1/1 counters. So it gets crazy. And when you're talking mana being a mono blue deck, again, disagree there, because essentially humans is a monocolored deck as well. It is a monocolored humans deck because it runs Ancient Ziggurat, Cavernous Souls, Unclaimed Territory. I mean, it runs all the tribal-based lands, and that's why it can be 5 colors. So you're really never running into mana problems. It also runs 4 of Noble Hierarch. So again, mana fixing. Again,
and a human too.
And a human. now where I said spirits probably have the better lord compared to humans. Humans' mana base is going to be a little bit stronger than the Bant spirits. The Bant spirits runs the traditional fetch and shock package of land, but it also runs the 4 Noble Hierarchs as well. And what does Noble Hierarch tap for?
Blue, green, white.
Exactly. So they're running 22 lands, but they're essentially running 26. So and nothing in these decks are high mana costed. So it's very, very rarely have I seen I've never seen the humans deck get mana screwed, and I don't think I've seen the spirit deck get mana screwed as of yet. So my point is, I don't think the mana and the easy castability of cards in Merfolk is really a thing. I think that what it does, it is more immune to Blood Moon than these other 2 decks are.
I was actually going to bring that up because that's definitely a huge thing in Modern.
Kinda. I mean, Blood Moon isn't being seen that much as it used to be.
No, for sure. But definitely for decks that are running red, I mean, if you're not running it in the main, you're definitely running at least 1 or 2 in the side. And against when you run into humans, like, you need to shut that down as on the quick fast, basically, and it's definitely it definitely wrecks humans, I think, a little bit harder than it wrecks spirits.
Oh yeah, you know, humans is in a lot of trouble if a Blood Moon hits the board.
Yeah.
Actually, let me roll that back a little bit. Kind of, because at that point, when turn 3, when the Blood Moon hits, the humans deck has already played a bunch of cards. So if they play a Noble Hierarch, they're probably gonna be okay.
I'm not saying that they're dead in the water. I'm just saying that deck is more susceptible to it than spirits is.
When Blood Moon hits on the humans deck, it essentially becomes a deck that has to think about what it taps for mana rather than just having 5 color mana for everything.
Yeah, so it brings it down to our level.
Yeah, it brings it down to where it's like, oh, I'm now a multicolored deck who has to consider what mana I'm tapping.
I thought it would actually be pretty fun to do a league with blue red Merfolk that kind of just ran like bolts and Blood Moon. I think
that sounds like a future episode, sir.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it is. We'll get to it eventually.
Real quick, and the other thing on the spirits deck for the mana is it runs Cocos. So make sure you get your basic forest out, or your Noble Hierarch, and then it doesn't matter as much if you can, because you have 4 collecting companies.
Yeah.
You just cheat everything in.
So now we're gonna kind of go and. One thing we're going to go into kind of things that the other decks have over us, but I do want to, before we go in there, as you noted here, I want to talk about the one of the things is that, to keep in mind when we go over what Merfolk has or what Merfolk doesn't have versus these other decks is to also consider that Bant Spirits is not a Vile deck. Humans, however, is a Vile deck. So that's something to keep in mind when we're basing our evaluations.
Correct. So I listed similarities. I listed Aether Vial as a similarity that all three decks have, and I guess I was wrong about that because the Bant Spirits does not play it currently. We'll see what happens in the future. Yeah. It's just these decks all end up running Aether Vial, it seems. Cavern of Souls is another one that all three of these decks seem to be playing, again, because it's tribal synergy. And then my last point was tribal synergy. There are three decks that are based around spirits doing stuff, fish doing stuff, or humans doing stuff. Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to mention, and this is, I think, hands down, there's no debate on this. One thing that Merfolk does better than any of the other decks that are tribal is draw cards. With your 4 Spreading Seas, which is probably the best card in the deck, and your Silver Gill Atoms.
I think it's simultaneously the best card and the worst card in the deck. Because, number one, I mean, you need... as you said, as one of the first things you have listed here for what Merfolk has that, or what Merfolk kind of lacks is that.
Let's do it all at once.
Okay,
you want to move right into it then?
Yeah, let's just move into it because I have kind of points to make. In support of what you're saying, and not trying to drag you down or anything.
Sure. So the first point that we listed where Merfolk is lacking is evasion. So please continue.
Yeah. So you put down that Merfolk has evasion and gets evasion fairly easily, with Island Walk being again, islands being the highest played basic land in Modern. Fight me, and basically we have 8 ways to give our Merfolk Island Walk, which is pretty consistent. But then we have to run Spreading Seas. And again, as Matt pointed out, it's really good. It shuts off multicolored lands, it enables Island Walk, and it draws us a card.
It kills creatures when you're dealing with Inkmoth Nexus and Colonnades.
Yes, it definitely does that. It shuts down manlands, which is really important in certain matchups, like against Infect and Affinity, and even the Jeskai control decks.
Because the Colonnades are like one of their only win conditions.
Yeah. Well, and so... it's good in those ways, but basically pretty much the main reason you run it, besides being a land killer, is to force Island Walk.
And then it auto replaces itself with the card draw.
Yeah, that's fair. So to me, it's kind of like you kind of... I think we wish we had something a little bit less dependent, because I mean, if you're playing against a deck that's playing like blue red or whatever, then you may not necessarily even need it. You don't need to. So they're just easy side outs, and if you draw it, you're just kind of like, well, I have to pay 2 mana to get rid of this.
Yeah. So the points I had to make were, first of all, Land Walk is probably one of the best forms of evasion there is, and that's what we talked about last week with Pappy Popper. By the way, shout out to Pappy Popper. Thank you for being on last week. But it's so good and so uninteractive that on the Storm scale, it's a 9. So it's probably never getting reprinted. I mean, I'd be shocked if we ever saw a card, or a new card at least, with Island Walk, Forest Walk, Mountain Walk, any of that. So
maybe in like Conspiracy or something like that, but definitely not in a core set or
master
sets. But those are all
standard
reprints
legal
anyway.
Yeah, but so my point being, and I think Kody was kind of hitting this a little bit, is that the Island Walk is very, very, very conditional. So again, you have to have a Lord, and you have to have a Spreading Seas, or you have to be playing a opponent who does have basic islands or dual lands that have an island in them. So there's just multiple ways where between interaction and just bad luck that your evasion does not exist. Whereas in the Spirits deck and the Humans deck, you have flying. And flying is an incredibly powerful form of evasion, especially in Modern, because there aren't very many flying creatures.
And important to note, it just comes natural on those creatures. Like there's nothing you need to do to set that up.
Correct. So whereas Merfolk, you're assembling evasion Tron essentially. to
That's a fun way to look at it.
Yeah, evasion Tron assembled. Yeah. So spirits, every spirit has flying. The only creature in that deck, I believe, I'm not going to go back and check right now, is Noble Hierarch, who doesn't have flying.
Yeah.
So, but that
has Exalted,
Exalted. Yeah. So yeah. So everything has evasion, and then in the humans deck, you have the Mantis Rider, and I keep pronouncing this card wrong. I keep making up a new name for it. The Freesale Booter. The Freesale Booter. The Freesale Booter. There you go. We have a local brewery here called Freetail. That's amazing. So I'm like, I always call him the Freetail Booter. I know that's wrong.
Well, we'll have to find somebody to edit you some Freetail Booters.
There you go. I would not be opposed to that.
So that way you won't be wrong.
That's 100% true. Yeah. So I did just check. There is absolutely no creature in the main board that does not have flying. Geist of Saint Traff and Thalia are sometimes in the sideboard, and I've seen Geists in the most recent list fall at the sideboard. So yeah, I mean everything is flying evasion, and again, Mantis Riders are they beat face. So
yeah. Well, and so this kind of also, I mean, you have a list of basically the things here that you're kind of going through, and one of the big things to note, I mean, maybe not as much in spirits as it is in humans, all of their creatures, which are important in any tribal deck, you basically, if you're in a tribal deck, you need to have a density of creatures. I don't know of a creature in the humans list that doesn't have a spell attached to it.
Correct. So I think I called this when I wrote up the notes this morning. They enter the battlefield triggers,
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Yeah, something on a stick essentially. Mm-hmm. And you're 100% right. So realistically, the only two Merfolk, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't go back to the Merfolk deck list because we talk about it so much I should know them off the top of my head. That really have this are going to be Silvergill Adept and Marrow Regery. Now, I guess if you want to call it on a stick, something that's going on, we can have Curse Catcher on there as well, but it's not an enter the battlefield trigger.
So I actually did want to add. We have Merfolk Trickster now, which is kind of.
I'm sorry. And I had Merfolk Trickster on my list too. I just didn't mention it.
Yeah,
I did have it written down. It's on the notes.
Yeah, it's on the notes.
Patrons can let you know that I wasn't lying.
Yeah, it's Merfolk Trickster is actually a really good example of what I would like to see from Merfolk in the future. We need Merfolk, but we need Merfolk that do's things. So like do's things. Yeah.
Do's more.
These Merfolk needs to do's more, and basically, Merfolk Trickster is kind of like a mirror image of what all these humans are. They enter the battlefield and they do's something, and that's something that we need to see.
Yeah. I mean, we can just go down the whole list. So, Champion the Parish, whenever another human enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it. The Freetail Booter, it enters the battlefield and it duresses. No, actually, I'm sorry, it does not. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it and exile that until it leaves the battlefield. So kind of a duress, kind of not. Meddling Mage enters the battlefield. Name a card. That card, non-land card. That card can't be played. Reflector Mage. It enters the battlefield and it bounces something and it can't be played the next turn, which essentially, I mean, can time walk people. Mm-hmm. Thalia's Lieutenant, when it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each other human you control, and we already talked about this guy. I mean, so yeah, everything just does something.
Yeah, and one other thing I do want to say, when we did run Curse Catcher as kind of one of the catch-alls, and another recent example is Mistcaller. are kind of onboard tricks. And so those aren't necessarily bad, but they're a little bit slower. And so when we have things like Merfolk Trickster that do something when they enter, or Kite Self Rebooter, or any of those, those are the things that, I don't know that you have in your hand. I mean, I'm going to assume that you have them in your hand, because why would you, keep intentionally keep a 6-lander with an Aether Vial? But it's one of those things that, when I play a Curse Catcher, it's there. Or when I play a Mist Caller, it's there.
Yeah. And the Spirits deck is the same way. It doesn't have nearly as many triggers as the Humans deck, hence why it's not as good. It's actually probably more on par with the Merfolk deck, to be completely honest. But unfortunately, I think the things that it does better than the Merfolk deck. Mm-hmm. For example, you have Mausoleum Wanderer. Don't want to go into him right now because I want to talk about him in just a minute. But then you have Rattle Chains. It is 1 blue, 1 of anything for 2/1 flash flying. When it enters the battlefield, target spirit gains hexproof until the end of turn. And then now you can cast spirits as though they had flash. So for Grizzly Bear mana cost, it does everything. Yeah. And then you have a Spell Queller, which when this thing was printed, I knew this was a boss. 1 blue, 1 white, 1 of anything, for a 2/3 spirit, flash flying. When Spell Queller enters the battlefield, exile target spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. When he leaves the battlefield, the exile card owner can now cast that card without paying its mana cost, so it gets the spell back. Essentially, it's just amazing. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and actually one card that I didn't see on here, but I was kind of surprised, and this kind of fits more in the Curse Catcher category, but is Selfless Spirit.
Correct. Selfless Spirit is kind of on a stick, but I had trouble classifying him. Mm-hmm. But so Selfless Spirit, since you brought him up, and I think you're absolutely right. He can fall in here as well. Is 1 white, 1 of anything for 2/1. He, again, like all spirits, has flying, and he has Sacrifice Selfless Spirit. Creatures you can control gain indestructible to the end of turn. So the biggest thing that can really hurt a tribal deck is like board wipes or even targeted removal. And Selfless Spirit can make sure that does not hurt the Spirits deck. Which,
again, that's a neat fatal push.
Yeah, and it's gone.
Yeah.
Whereas the Merfolk deck cannot protect itself nearly as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's yeah, and these onboard tricks aren't necessarily bad. And that, I didn't mean to say that about Curse Catcher or I didn't mean to infer that, I suppose is more correct, for Mistcaller and Curse Catcher, because obviously we see Selfless Spirit being an incredible onboard trick. And it just kind of tells your opponent, like, look, I know you have Wrath of God.
And I just don't care.
And that's real cute. I love that.
Who has 2 thumbs and doesn't give a carp? This guy.
This guy right here.
So the last thing that we wanted to bring up, where Merfolk is probably falling a little bit behind the other 2 decks, is in control. So for being a mono blue deck, the modern Merfolk has a very lackluster control package. So we have Curse Catcher, which is, according to Corbin,
nobody plays right now,
and I believe is the worst Curse Catcher.
Which is why most people have moved off of playing it, honestly.
Yeah. You have Spreading Seas, which again is a control-y based card because you're removing lands from the other opponent. But again, as we talked about before, it doesn't necessarily destroy the other opponent's game plan. It kind of sometimes it does, but sometimes it's just kind of more of a minor annoyance, if anything. You have Kopala and Kira, which are very insignificant compared to Selfless Spirit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they make it so it's harder to interact with your creatures, but it doesn't make them impossible.
Not impossible, yeah.
And then you have a variety of counter magic sometimes in the main board, more rarely, but mostly in the sideboard of like your Dispel, Spell Pierces, Defense Rejections, Vapor Snags, etc.
Well, so actually, I do want to counter your argument here real quick. I'm gonna
Sure.
I'm gonna spell pierce your argument.
Ooh,
So
I do have 2 mana untapped.
well, we'll see if you want to really pay the 2 mana.
Fair.
Spell pierce is run in the main now. I mean, at least in my case, and most people have kind of seen the light too, that curse catcher being an onboard trick just kind of forced people to think about how they play things.
Mm-hmm.
And what is Merfolk if not a tempo deck? Spell Pierce is not a control card. It's a light control card. It's basically a tempo card.
It's a control card. I mean, I get your argument, but there's no way you're ever going to tell me that a counterspell is not a control card.
Well, no, it is, but it's a conditional, and so you're trying to hit them at the correct time, and then on top of that, at least in my list, what I'm doing is in the sideboard I'm running 4 of Deprive,
Mm-hmm.
which is a hard counter,
Correct.
which has been kind of surging in popularity, and then also Echoing Truth has kind of come back as one of the answers because,
Did Matt leave those 2 off on purpose because he knew Kody would want to talk about them?
probably.
He actually did, but he also just couldn't remember the names off the top of his head and he was too lazy to look them up.
So one of the things about, I mean, obviously just having a hard counter like Deprive is just incredible. Just a no. You are not doing this. I will deal with you right now. And Echoing Truth actually is kind of really good against these creature decks, because what have we said about both of these decks? You need a high density of creatures, and ideally, just like Merfolk, you want to have multiples of those creatures. That's why we run 4 of Lord of Atlantis, 4 of Master of the Pearl Trident. So guess what? Sometimes you can get them before they're able to, do their thing. And it's not so much in humans, because a lot of their important humans are legendary, aka Thalia. But it's one of those things that you're not trying to be a hard control deck with Merfolk. You're trying to just gain little advantages where you can, and both of these decks do definitely make that hard. Despite our sideboard pieces.
And I agree. Merfolk is not 100% a control deck. But again, one of the things, and this is where we kind of disagree a little bit, is you say it is more or less 100% a tempo deck, but I think it is more a tempo / aggro / control deck. It kind of has sometimes trouble figuring out what it wants to be. And my argument has been for this is that for what it does, it just doesn't do it as well. Because these other decks aren't just one type of thing either. They do multiple things. Both of these decks, humans and spirits, are somewhat aggro. They're somewhat control-y. I think they're a little less tempo-y than the Merfolk is. I'll say that. So where I was going with the control aspect, though, is that Spirits has the Spell Queller, which we talked about, which is kind of a counterspell on a stick. It's going to be running your Mausoleum Wanderers, which is for the people who have been listening to this show for a long time, and we had Corbin on, which was episode 3, 4, really
episode 5, I think.
5, really early. Mausoleum Wanderer is the best curse catcher right now, and it is 1 blue for a 1/1 flying, and it has whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under your control, Mausoleum Wanderer gets 1/1 till the end of turn, and it has sacrifice Mausoleum Wanderer, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays X, where X is Mausoleum Wanderer's power. So again, it can be potentially a very high density of a counter, or it could be if anything, it's just a 1/1 flyer that can be pumped up, which has built-in invasion. So yeah, it's a much better curse catcher. Yeah. Then they also run Path to Exile, which is, I want to still say, the best removal spell in Modern. I know with Fatal Push and even Lightning Bolt, people are going to come at me and say I'm wrong and I'm an idiot, and they're probably right. I'm probably pretty dumb, but I'm going to hold by that.
It's probably the least conditional.
Correct.
If that makes sense. Like, I mean, obviously with Push, you need it to be in a specific CMC range, and with Bolt, you need them to be in a certain toughness range. But Path just kind of just says
it just takes care of it.
Yeah, and I mean Hexproof, you can't use Hexproof as an argument because Hexproof stops all 3.
Yeah.
So Bam.
So you have Path. So you have one of the best spot removal cards, and then the sideboard. I mean, you have rest. Since you're in white, you have Rest in Peace, destroy all graveyard strategies, Stony Silence, destroy all artifact based strategies. And one of the things we said is Spirits does not run any artifacts. And then you have Unified Will, which is a 1 blue 1 hard counter if you control more creatures than the opponent. And more often than not, you're probably going to control more creatures than your opponent with Spirits. Again, unless you're playing probably humans, and you're not going to be sideboarding Unified Will in. And then the humans deck, and the control package of the humans deck is better as well. You have the Freetail Kite Booter, who he hits your hand, so he just removes the threat before it even becomes a threat on the board. You have your Meddling Mage, which again, if you know what your opponent is playing, and more often than not in Modern, you can tell by turn 2 what deck your opponent is playing, so you can shut them off of their win cons or something that allows them to play their cards. You have Reflector Mage, which, as we said before, can time walk people, and it's just a phenomenal card. Then you have Thalia, which we haven't even said what she does because everybody should know, but she's 1 white, 1 of anything for a 2/1 legendary creature, human soldier. She has first strike, and non-creature spells cost 1 more. So this can just destroy decks. And they also play 1 copy of Thalia Heretic Qatar, which I love this card. It's a 1 white, 2 of anything for a 3/2 first strike, and creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, which is just, it's Kismet on a stick, and it's just brutal.
Yeah, I my first legacy deck was mono white soldiers, and oh man, Thalia in both iterations were just
so
brick
good.
houses, just stop you from doing what you're doing.
So again, my thesis is, as we've said before, that it's just these decks are, again, as a whole, when you put the whole entire package together, they just are slightly better. Well, I think Spirits is slightly better. I think Humans is much, much better than Merfolk right now.
And obviously the dust hasn't settled on any of this. We're not saying that this is the end all be all word on it. But again, like we said in the beginning, you have to evaluate where you are.
Correct.
And that's what we're doing here.
Another thing that we have to take into consideration is the sideboards against us. Is that now that Humans and now Spirits have become more and more of a thing, what are people now going to be sideboarding normally? And that's going to be mass removal, whether it be your Settle the Wreckages, your Pyroclasms, your Kozilek's Returns, whatever the choice is based on the color combination that they're playing against. For the most part, for the last few years, Merfolk have kind of swam under the radar enough where there wasn't really a sideboard package assembled to combat Merfolk. But now that Humans has become one of the most dominant decks in Modern, and now Spirits is there, these decks are running a sideboard package to deal with these decks. And unfortunately, the sweeper cards hit Merfolk, which means that ipso facto, we now have sideboard hate more often against us, which makes games 2 and 3 much more difficult.
Yeah, so going into wrapping things up here, given all this information, like why should we continue playing this deck?
So I had a few points I wrote down. So a lot of people get into Merfolk from that are older players because of nostalgia. It's a tribe that's been around forever and a deck that has been around forever. There's been many incarnations of the deck, whether it be in like Lorwyn Standard. Then you have your old
Extended, Legacy.
Yeah, and then it's ever since Modern became a format, it's been there. Yeah, it's been Extended, it's been a Legacy. So even the nostalgia, people get back into Magic after not playing for a while, and they're like, "Oh, Merfolk's still a thing. I'll play that." And then they look at the price point's right there. So if you're somebody who wants to get into Magic, it's just an easy deck to build. Or if you just want to have a secondary deck, it's an easy deck to build because the price point's not very high. And then for newer players, a lot of newer players get into Magic by watching YouTube. And I'll even say 3 of Magic's biggest celebrities.
4 of
I'm sorry, 4-up.
Present company excluded, I suppose.
Yeah. So Cody Smith, a Magic celebrity, Nikachu, who is very big on the YouTube scene, especially because he exclusively plays Merfolk. But the two I really wanted to hit, sorry, Nikachu and Cody Smith, are Corbin Hostler, who is a very successful and very well-known Magic player. Merfolk is kind of his pet deck, and the professor at Tulare Community College, which is now the most. He's the most probably famous Magic content creator by far.
He has more Twitter followers than Wizards does.
Yeah,
which
he has more Twitter followers than Mothership, and I think more followers on YouTube as well. So
insane. It's just insane that somebody has more than the people who make the game.
So yeah. So again, when he does his public library, which he hasn't done in a while, when he actually plays on MTGO, he's traditionally playing Merfolk. So there's a lot of eyes on that. So a lot of new players see that and they're like, oh, that looks like a fun deck. I'll go play that. But the two things I wanted to point out, and I'm sure Kody has a lot more to say, and we're gonna do this fast, is Merfolk has a lot of interactive decision making, which I don't think the Spirits deck and the Humans deck necessarily have, which can make those gameplay, though you're winning, a little bit more boring. And Merfolk's just a fun deck to play. It's just, I mean, you finish and you had a good time. I mean, there's a lot of times I play I've played Dredge in the past, or I've played Panza and other things like that, and I win packs and I win a little bit of money or whatever. But it's like, I played to win. I didn't play to have fun. Yeah.
So I definitely like what you said about interactive decision making. Look, all of these decks, I think either one of us could shuffle up and win an F&M with. Maybe not like a league on Magic Online, but it's pretty straightforward. You dump as many things as you can on the board. You keep up, interaction with your opponent's spells. But for the most part, most tribal decks are, get a good creature density, be able to protect those creatures, and turn them sideways. But Merfolk kind of rewards you for taking your time to think about what's going on in whatever situation. And sequencing your plays is incredibly important in Merfolk. Because, and believe me, I've watch any of my streams, especially when Tux is on. TuxDev is a legacy Merfolk streamer. He comes on my streams and trashes me for making for putting things in the wrong order. And he's right. You have to sequence things correctly, or you will incredibly decrease your chances of winning. And so with Merfolk, if you pay attention, if you go through things slowly and you actually think about your plays, then you can usually outsmart other decks. However, I will clarify that this takes a lot of practice. So it's a deck that rewards dedication. And I think that's really the biggest thing of why people like Merfolk. It's a deck that if you stick with it, if you really think about what's going on and you really put thought into why did I Spreading Seas this land? Why did I Spreading Seas on turn 2 instead of playing a Silvergill Adept? Like, those are such little changes that could be made to your gameplay. But ultimately, those are things that could win or lose you the game. Like, maybe later on you needed the Island Walk and you didn't get the damage that you missed was because you didn't put down the Spreading Seas on turn 2 when you could have, and you advanced your board. And those are just things that you don't know unless you play the deck a lot.
Yeah. So a few weeks ago, Kody posted something on Twitter, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember exactly what the tweet was, but it was something along the lines of Merfolk is a interactive and fun deck that if you put the time into learning, you're going to win about 66% of the time. Was what you said, 70% of the time, maybe?
I think I said like 80, but I
think it was less. I think it was less. I think it was in the 66 to 70%. Anyway, so I took a break from trolling Kody's Twitter to actually defend it because a lot of people were attacking him, saying there's absolutely no chance. Merfolk's a trash deck. It doesn't win that much. Blah blah blah. And my response was absolutely not. You were 100% wrong. If you look at the caveats that Kody did put into his argument, that yes, it is a deck that if you put the time in, you are going to win about we'll say 70% of the time. and I think that's 100% true, because I think 70% is kind of where a tier 2 deck should be. Anything less than that is most likely unplayable or more fringe decks. I mean, if you look at what Saffron Olive does, he plays those goofy decks that he builds, and he wins quite often with them. So Merfolk is a solid deck that you're going to win with and you're going to have fun with. It's just, again, at this point in the meta, it's not tier 1, and unfortunately, it's not the top tribal deck. And again, and that's not to say, as we said before, that's not going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at any pro's records. You know, any pro. Ask any pro on Twitter. I'm sure they would get back to you on it. Their win percentage, I would say that most, even top level pros, they're lucky to have their overall 100% win, over their whole career win totals be in the 60% range. Like you would be incredibly good at Magic if you won 60% of all of your games. And so, like I said, putting it at 70%, like if you're winning 70% of your matches, then you are doing incredibly well. Like that is a high bar to hit.
Yeah, you're winning 2 or 3 rounds or 3 or 5 essentially.
Yeah. And that may not sound very good, but put in that perspective, like that pros, are lucky to win 60 to 80% of all of their matches. Like that's pretty good. I would be super happy with 70%. I'm not quite there yet myself, but I'll get there.
I think Jeff Hooglin talks about this a lot on his channel. That Modern is a 3-2 format. Yeah. And I'll say I'm a very efficient Tron player. I 5-0 quite a bit, but if I had to say the record I have more often than not is 3-2.
Yeah,
I mean, that's fine. I don't 0-5 very often. I don't 1-4 very often. But I do 3-2 quite a bit.
And that's fine. Like there's 100%. Nothing wrong with 3-2ing. If you're having fun and playing Magic, then go for it.
3-2 is usually good enough for top 8.
Yeah, definitely.
F&M, obviously. But you know what? We're running long, so let's wrap this up.
Yeah, remember you can reach out and talk to us about this controversial episode or anything you want to talk to us about on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.
We'll be up more up next week, I promise.
Yeah, at FishcastMTG. You can talk to me personally on Twitter as @NotCodySmith. And where can we find you, Matt?
You can see me at MatthewCaudill8.
And if you have a longer form question or anything else you want to discuss with us that would take longer than the tweet lengths or Facebook message, you can email us at fishcastmtg@gmail.com. Our cover art was made by Tessa and Hunter Pruitt. And if you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe to us in the Apple or Google Play podcast apps, or find us wherever you can and just subscribe, follow, comment, interact with us. That's a way you can support us for 0 space bucks. Or on patreon.com at patreon.com/fishcastmtg. Supporting us for even $1 helps us way more than the ad money that we get. So thank you so much to all of our Patreon subscribers. And Matt, we'll see everybody next week.
I think we will. Have a good night, everyone.